How much would you pay to change your life forever? For most people, that question sounds impossible to answer. But for investor Guy Spier, the price was very specific: $650,100. That was the amount he paid to have lunch with Warren Buffett, one of the most respected investors in the world. To many people, this may sound unbelievable. Why would anyone pay that much money for a single meal? But for Spier, it was not really about the food. It was about transformation. At that point in his life, he was already highly educated, ambitious, and successful on the surface. He had studied at Oxford University and entered the world of finance with big dreams. From the outside, his career looked impressive, but inside, he was deeply unhappy. He had become part of a finance culture that rewarded aggression, salesmanship, and short-term thinking. He worked in an environment he hated, and slowly, he felt himself becoming someone he did not respect. He later described this version of himself as inauthentic, someone who had compromised his values in order to survive in a ruthless business world. Then something changed. Through the ideas of value investing, and through the influence of people like Warren Buffett and Benjamin Graham, Spier discovered a different way to think about money, business, and life. He realized that investing did not have to be about manipulation, pressure, and greed. It could be built on patience, honesty, rational thinking, self-awareness, and long-term value. The Education of a Value Investor is not only a book about investing. It is about how one investor moved from ambition and dissatisfaction toward wisdom, self-awareness, and integrity. It is a story about how becoming a better investor can also mean becoming a better human being. Before we understand how Spier changed, we first need to understand what shaped his thinking in the beginning. His journey started with something many people admire: an elite education. But as he later discovered, that education gave him confidence without fully preparing him for the messy reality of business. Many people believe that an elite education is one of the strongest advantages a person can have, and in many ways, it is. A degree from a famous university can open doors, create opportunities, and give people confidence. But Guy Spier argues that elite education can also create serious problems. Prestigious universities and business schools often teach students impressive technical skills. They teach economic theories, financial models, and rational decision-making frameworks. On paper, these tools look powerful. But in the real world, things are rarely as clean and predictable as they appear in textbooks. One example is the 2007 to 2008 financial crisis. Many highly educated people from top business schools failed to see the crisis coming. This was not because they lacked intelligence. It was because their training had taught them to think too narrowly. Elite education often depends on theories that assume people have perfect information. But in real life, no one has perfect information. Imagine trying to calculate the correct price of ham. In theory, you could gather data about how many stores sell ham, how many pigs are slaughtered, how much demand exists, and how supply affects price. With enough information, you might calculate an ideal price. But reality is much messier. A store inside a train station may charge more because customers are in a hurry. Another store may offer discounts to attract buyers. Local competition, rent, transportation costs, customer habits, and timing can all affect the price. There are simply too many factors to include in a perfect model. This is why many theories taught in elite schools do not fully match the real business world. Another problem is that elite education often worships rational thinking while ignoring instinct, judgment, and independent thought. Students are often rewarded for following accepted frameworks. But if they come up with an idea that is too different from the norm, they may stay silent because they fear being judged. This can make people intellectually cautious. Instead of thinking freely, they learn to fit into the system. And there is another danger: arrogance. If someone is very rational and comes from a top institution, they may start believing they are smarter than almost everyone else. When they enter the workplace, they may ignore advice from people with more experience simply because those people do not have the same educational background. In other words, elite education can create confidence, but it can also create blindness. The lesson is not that education is useless. The lesson is that education is incomplete. Real wisdom requires humility, practical judgment, and the ability to learn from reality, not just from theories. But the weakness of elite education is not only that it can make people overconfident. It can also leave them unprepared for moral pressure. And when Spier entered the finance world, he quickly discovered that the real challenge was not just making smart decisions. It was protecting his own ethics. Imagine this. You have just graduated from college and joined a major investment firm. You are ambitious, excited, and determined to prove yourself. You want to succeed. You want your colleagues to respect you. You want to show that you belong. But during your first week, you discover something disturbing. The company often makes money by misleading clients. Now you face a difficult choice. Should you stay and benefit from the system? Or should you leave and protect your conscience? This is the kind of moral dilemma many people face in the business world, especially in finance. Some companies, particularly aggressive firms on Wall Street, use questionable methods to maximize profits. They may pressure employees to sell products that are not truly good for clients. They may exaggerate potential returns. They may hide risks. They may make deals appear better than they really are. Guy Spier experienced this kind of environment at D.H. Blair & Company, a brokerage firm where aggressive salesmanship and questionable ethics were part of the culture. The company's business model relied on convincing clients that certain investments were more attractive than they truly were. Employees were expected to participate. New workers, especially young and ambitious ones, faced enormous pressure to fit in. The problem is not only the company's expectations. The problem is also personal ambition. When you are surrounded by people who are making deals, earning money, and gaining status, it becomes very hard to stand apart. If you are the only person who has not closed a deal, you may start asking yourself uncomfortable questions. Maybe everyone else is doing what is necessary. Maybe this is just how the industry works. Maybe I need to be less idealistic. Maybe I should do what they do, or I will fall behind. This is how people slowly compromise their values. Most people do not wake up one morning and decide to become unethical. Instead, they take one small step, then another, then another. Over time, behavior that once felt wrong starts to feel normal. Spier realized that he had fallen into this trap. He had compromised his own standards in order to survive and compete. But the book also makes an important point. Making mistakes does not have to be the end. If you recognize that you have acted against your values, that realization can become the beginning of change. The key is to admit the truth, learn from it, and rebuild your life around stronger principles. It is not easy to recognize moral corruption when it surrounds you, and it is even harder to escape from it. But if you want to build a meaningful career, you must protect your ethics before the environment reshapes you. After experiencing this kind of environment, Spier began to realize that ambition without ethics could turn him into someone he did not want to become. But he still needed proof that there was another way to succeed in finance. That proof came from Warren Buffett and the philosophy of value investing. Sometimes a book can change the direction of a person's life. For Guy Spier, two books had that effect: Benjamin Graham's The Intelligent Investor and Roger Lowenstein's Buffett, The Making of an American Capitalist. At the time, Spier was disillusioned with his work at D.H. Blair. He had seen a version of finance that felt dishonest and empty. But through Graham and Buffett, he discovered a completely different philosophy. That philosophy was value investing. Value investing is not about chasing market excitement. It is not about selling the hottest stock to the next buyer. It is not about short-term speculation. Instead, value investing is about looking at a stock as ownership in a real business. A share is not just a piece of paper or a number on a screen. It represents part of a company with employees, products, customers, assets, problems, and future possibilities. This shift in thinking is powerful. When investors focus only on short-term market movements, they can become careless and unethical. They may feel pressure to push clients into risky trades or exaggerate stories to make quick sales. But when investors focus on long-term business value, the pressure changes. They no longer need to deceive people for immediate profit. They can patiently search for companies that are genuinely worth owning. This makes value investing not only more rational, but also more ethical. Warren Buffett became a powerful role model for Spier because Buffett showed that a person could become extremely successful without abandoning integrity. Buffett's success was built on patience, discipline, hard work, personal experience, and ethical behavior. Spier realized that if he wanted to change, he needed a model to follow. This is important because changing your life is difficult when you do not know what the alternative looks like. If your environment is unhealthy, but you have never seen a healthier model, you may feel trapped. A role model gives you a path. Spier began to study Buffett's behavior carefully. He used a process sometimes called matching and mirroring, observing how a successful person acts, then trying to understand the deeper motivations behind those actions. Buffett's example helped Spier see that the culture at D.H. Blair was not the only way to succeed in finance. In fact, it was the opposite of the kind of investor and person he wanted to become. This realization gave him the courage to leave. But discovering Buffett's philosophy was only the beginning. Knowing that a better path exists is not the same as having the courage to follow it. Spier still had to rebuild his mindset, change his motivation, and create a business life that reflected his own values. When people start something new, they are often excited in the beginning. But after a while, the excitement fades. Problems appear. Progress feels slow. Doubts begin to grow. This is why many people give up too early. Spier argues that one reason people fail is that they approach new projects with the wrong attitude. They expect success to arrive naturally, as if a small idea will automatically grow into a great business. But success does not work that way. You cannot simply plant a seed and wait for it to become a mighty oak. You have to act. You have to test your ideas. You have to learn from reality. You have to keep going even when results are not immediate. A positive attitude does not mean blind optimism. It means practical confidence. It means believing that you can improve through action. Spier also learned that he needed to understand his own emotions and weaknesses. Even after he began succeeding as a value investor, he noticed that he was still driven by envy. He compared himself to other investors who used short-term methods or even unethical strategies. This comparison made him unhappy. So he worked to change his motivation. Instead of measuring himself against others, he focused on building a business that matched his own values. This led him to break with traditional practices in the investment world. For example, many investors manage multiple portfolios for different clients. This can allow them to hide poor performance in some portfolios while showing stronger results in others. It can make the business look better than it really is. Spier chose a different path. He decided to focus on a single portfolio. This made his results more transparent. It helped him maintain credibility, build trust, and keep a clear overview of his investments. Many people thought this was foolish. In the traditional finance world, his approach looked too simple and too limiting. But it worked. By prioritizing trust over appearance, Spier created stronger relationships with clients and investors. He proved that breaking industry norms can be a strength if the decision is based on ethics and long-term thinking. The lesson is clear. If traditional practices do not match your values, you do not have to follow them. You can build your own way. Once Spier began building his own path, he realized that investing was not only about numbers, portfolios, and stock prices. It was also about people. If he wanted to build a business based on trust, then his relationships also had to be based on honesty, gratitude, and authenticity. Many people think networking is about collecting business contacts. They attend events, exchange cards, and try to meet people who can help them professionally. But Spier discovered a different kind of networking. The strongest network is not built only on business interest. It is built on friendship, care, gratitude, and mutual favors. If you treat every person as a transaction, people will sense it. But if you treat people with real interest and authenticity, they become more willing to trust you. When Spier started as a value investor, he developed a simple habit. He wrote thank you cards. He wrote to people who helped him professionally. He wrote to people who gave inspiring speeches. He wrote to people who did him personal favors. At first, these were small gestures. But over time, they created meaningful connections. People began to respond. They remembered him. They invited him to conferences and networking events. His name became familiar to people in his field. This shows an important principle. Small acts of gratitude can grow into a strong social network. Spier also believed that honesty and helpfulness make clients more interested in you and your business. He refers to ideas from David Hawkins's book Power versus Force, The Hidden Determinants of Human Behavior. Hawkins argues that honest and authentic behavior gives people greater influence because others trust them. Trust is powerful. When people trust you, they are more open to your ideas. They believe your intentions are genuine. They feel safe around you. Over time, this creates personal goodwill. Instead of putting money first, You begin to value relationships. You start helping others. You begin looking for ways to give something back. This change also transforms your business mentality. You stop seeing business as a game of taking. You begin seeing it as a network of mutual support. Small favors can create momentum. Once you begin helping others in small ways, you notice more opportunities to improve your life, your business, and your relationships. Eventually, these small improvements build into larger acts of generosity. Warren Buffett is an extreme example. He pledged most of his wealth to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and now works with little personal concern for increasing his own fortune. His focus shifted from personal wealth to social responsibility. For Spier, this kind of generosity is not separate from value investing. It is part of the same philosophy. Think long-term, act with integrity, and build something meaningful. These values were not only useful in normal times. They became even more important when the financial world entered one of its darkest moments. The crisis of 2007 and 2008 tested whether Spier's philosophy could survive fear, panic, and falling markets. The financial crisis of 2007 and 2008 created panic across the world. Banks collapsed. Investors lost confidence. Stock prices fell dramatically. Fear spread through the financial system. For most investors, this kind of crisis is terrifying. But Spier argues that a value investor can face a crisis differently. Value investors are not immune to losses. They can still lose money when markets fall. But because they think long-term and avoid highly risky businesses, they are often better prepared than traditional investors. The environment around an investor matters greatly. If you are surrounded by panicking investors, you may begin to panic too. Fear can lead to irrational decisions. You may sell investments at the worst possible moment. You may abandon your strategy. You may compromise your standards. Value investors try to create an intellectual environment that protects them from this panic. They remind themselves that a stock represents part ownership in a real business, not just a moving price. Spier avoided many risky businesses connected to the financial market and the technology bubble. So when the 2008 crisis arrived, his portfolio still suffered, but it was not completely destroyed like many others. More importantly, he stayed calm enough to see opportunity. During a crisis, investors often sell good businesses at extremely low prices. They lose their nerve and sell everything, even companies with strong long-term value. For a value investor, this can be a rare chance. If a solid business is being sold for much less than its intrinsic value, the value investor can buy shares at a bargain price. Later, when the market recovers and the business continues performing, those investments can become very profitable. But this strategy requires emotional strength. A value investor must stay committed to carefully chosen investments and avoid selling immediately just because the market price falls. The crisis tests whether you truly believe in your philosophy. But surviving a crisis is not only about choosing the right investments. It is also about protecting your mind. Spier realized that even a strong philosophy can fail if your environment constantly pushes you toward fear, distraction, and emotional decisions. Modern finance is full of distractions. Prices move constantly. News updates arrive every minute. Emails demand attention. Websites tempt you. Market commentary creates fear and excitement. For investors, this environment can be dangerous. Spier argues that the human brain is not naturally designed to handle the emotional intensity of the financial world. When people deal with money, deep instinctive parts of the brain become activated. Money feels connected to survival, security, status, and desire. Because of this, financial decisions can trigger mood swings, irrational optimism, or irrational pessimism. In these emotional states, people often act too quickly and make poor decisions. During the financial crisis, one of Spier's employees withdrew all his money from Spier's hedge fund. This happened even though the employee understood the value investing philosophy and knew the fund was relatively safe. Fear overwhelmed rational thinking. Another challenge is willpower. Willpower is limited. If you constantly force yourself to resist distractions or emotional impulses, your mental energy eventually weakens. Psychologist Roy Baumeister demonstrated this idea in a study involving chocolate chip cookies. People who had to resist eating cookies used up mental energy, and afterward they became more likely to make mistakes. The lesson is simple: do not rely only on willpower. Instead, Design your environment so that good decisions become easier. For Spier, this meant changing his physical surroundings. He moved away from the intense financial environment of New York and relocated to Zurich. He also rented an office far from the busy and distracting city center. This new environment helped him think more clearly. It reduced noise, pressure, and temptation. It allowed him to focus on deep work and make better financial decisions. The broader lesson applies beyond investing. If your environment constantly pushes you toward bad decisions, do not blame yourself alone. Change the environment. Choose your city carefully. Design your office to match your working habits. Create daily routines that keep you focused on what matters. Success is not only about discipline. It is also about structure. Changing his environment helped Spier think more clearly, but it was not enough by itself. The human mind is still emotional, biased, and easily influenced. So Spier needed practical tools that could protect him from his own weaknesses. One major weakness Spier noticed was that he could be influenced by people trying to sell him something. When someone promoted an investment idea, or when he spoke with company management, he could be affected by their confidence and reasoning. To protect himself, he created a rule. He would not buy anything that was being actively sold to him. This rule helped him rely more on his own judgment. He wanted to buy only when he independently believed something was truly worth owning. Another important tool is the checklist. A checklist helps investors avoid obvious and predictable mistakes. This is especially important when money is involved because money can intoxicate the brain. Spier calls this condition cocaine brain. When people think about potential financial rewards, the brain's reward system becomes stimulated. This can lead to careless decisions. People begin chasing immediate gains and ignoring risks, even if they already know better. To fight this, Spier recommends studying your past mistakes and turning them into checklist questions. His own investment checklist contains more than 80 questions. He asks these questions before investing in a new company. For example, he considers, is the company's intrinsic value truly attractive? How stable is the company's value chain? Am I buying this because it is a good investment or because it satisfies some personal desire? Am I being influenced by ego, envy, or excitement? These questions slow down the decision-making process. They create space for rational thought. They help prevent avoidable mistakes. In a world full of uncertainty, good tools do not eliminate risk, but they help you think more clearly. Over time, these tools did more than improve Spier's investing process. They changed the way he understood himself. Value investing became less like a financial technique and more like a personal philosophy, one that helped him become calmer, more generous, and more self-aware. By the end of the book, Spier makes a surprising point. Value investing is not just a method for making money. It is also a path of personal transformation. After adopting this philosophy, Spier became calmer, more generous, and more self-aware. One major change was his movement from being a taker to becoming a giver. A taker approaches people with a hidden agenda. A taker asks, "What can I get from this person?" A giver asks a different question, "What does this person need, and how can I help?" This shift creates goodwill. When you help others sincerely, many people naturally want to help you in return. Over time, you become part of a positive community where people support each other and negative influences are gradually pushed away. Spier believes this change made him much happier. He also argues that investors must understand their inner fears, desires, and biases. This kind of self-knowledge is essential because the financial world is full of uncertainty. If you do not understand your own emotions, markets will control you. Recognizing your weaknesses is not comfortable. It may require facing the darkest parts of yourself, but it is necessary for growth. Spier suggests that people can seek help through career coaches, psychotherapy, religion, or any practice that increases self-understanding. The goal is not perfection. The goal is awareness. When you understand what motivates you and what scares you, you can make business decisions more objectively. You become less controlled by emotional pressure. Spier also took up bridge, a card game involving strategy and uncertainty. Playing bridge helped him develop skills that transferred into investing. It taught him how to think under uncertainty, manage risk, and make decisions with incomplete information. In this way, value investing became more than a financial strategy. It became a training ground for life. So by the end of Spier's journey, the lesson is much bigger than how to buy undervalued stocks. The deeper message is that the investor and the person cannot be separated. To become a better investor, Spier first had to become a better human being. The education of a value investor is about much more than stocks. The key message is that becoming a value investor means breaking away from unhealthy business conventions, building a network based on trust and generosity, and going through a serious inner journey. Guy Spier's story shows that success is not just about intelligence, ambition, or technical skill. It is also about ethics, environment, self-awareness, and the courage to choose a different path. He began as an ambitious but unhappy investor in a morally uncomfortable business world. Through value investing, he learned to think long-term, act with integrity, build authentic relationships, and design a life that made him calmer and happier. The book teaches that if you want to become a better investor, you must also work on becoming a better person. You need to understand your weaknesses. You need to protect yourself from bad environments. You need to surround yourself with positive people. You need to create rules and routines that help you make wiser decisions. And above all, you need to stay true to your values. The practical advice is simple but powerful. If you feel uncomfortable with your current career, ask yourself honestly, am I doing what I truly want to do? If your job's morals and business practices do not match your own ethics, you may need to invest time and effort into building a new career. But you do not always have to leave. Sometimes, you can also change your business from the inside. Breaking business norms can become part of professional success, as long as you remain honest, ethical, and connected to the right people. In the end, value investing is not only about finding undervalued companies. It is about becoming the kind of person who can make wise decisions in an uncertain world.